guys, it's Alex, and today I'm here with a book review for Missoula by Jon Krakauer. This is a nonfiction book that takes a look at rape culture. It's specifically about Missoula, but Missoula essentially exists in this book as a case study because he does talk about how Missoula is pretty average for rape statistics across America. I gave this book 5 stars and I absolutely adored it. This is my third Jon Krakauer book. I've previously read Into the Wild and Into Thin Air, which I gave 3 and 4 stars respectively, but this was a perfect 5 for me. I adored every second that I was reading this book. Not only is his writing style compelling and just as wonderful as it is in those other books, but I think this book had the extra edge because I'm more interested in rape culture than I am in mountaineering and adventuring stories like Into the Wild and Into Thin Air. So I think this book just had that extra edge that made me love it so much. But this is a wonderful book about rape culture. A lot of books that deal with the subject are written by insiders. They're written by people who have experienced rape, who have personal connection with rape. But Jon Krakauer doesn't, and I think it made this book interesting because it was an outsider's perspective. And he wrote this book in a way for outsiders, because he does talk a little bit at the end, which is pretty much the only point where he actually inserts himself into the book. He talks a little bit about how he didn't know much about rape culture. He didn't realize how prevalent it was. He didn't realize how many people, especially women, were affected by it. And he said that was kind of his inspiration for writing this book. Or not just the writing it, but initially researching it and learning more. And I think that shows in his writing that he writes this book for outsiders. He writes this book for people who were like him, who didn't understand, who didn't know, and he wants them to know. I think he was a wonderful ally in this book because apart from that little bit at the end, he didn't insert himself at all. He wrote this book for the women because specifically he does write about several cases where women were raped. And he does a wonderful job being a vehicle for them, being a vehicle for their stories, rather than inserting himself and his own thoughts over them. So that was what I thoroughly appreciated, because I am a little bit hesitant on books about rape culture that were written by outsiders, but he did a fantastic job in this. And I think because of that, this is definitely a book I'd recommend for other people who are outsiders, for other people who don't understand, who are coming from a place of ignorance, because that's not a shameful thing. It's just, if you don't have personal experience with it, if you haven't read much about it, I think this is a wonderful book to start with, because he covers the rapes themselves, but he covers them all the way through the justice system. Some just stop at the rape and they're never reported. Some are reported to the police, but nothing's done about them. Some go to trial. Some are just reported to the campus, and then there's a campus hearing about it. And he covers all of these different possibilities. And I think it's really important knowledge just for people to have a general understanding of not only the trauma that it is for the victim, but also just how it works in a realistic sense and what happens. I think it's an incredibly informative book in that regard, because even though I've read a fair amount about rape, and I do have personal experience with the matter, I think I learned a lot from this book, because you don't know every single outcome, and this book doesn't cover every single outcome, but it does cover a wide variety of them, and I think it was really interesting and just really important overall. Towards the end, there are a lot of court transcripts, and I think that can be difficult for people who maybe aren't as interested in that. I do think that could come across as a little dry. I really enjoyed them, but I also just really enjoy reading court transcripts in general, so to me that was absolutely fascinating. It was nice to see literally what was said in court, but I do think that's something to be aware of going in, that most of this book doesn't have much of that, but there are long sections towards the end because some of the cases make it to trial. And he covers the trial in great depth. He covers long passages, cross-examinations of witnesses, and stuff like that that are just literally transcribed in the book. So that could be a little dull for some people, but I thought it was fascinating. And I loved that he added it word for word. And my final note on this book is just a warning. Obviously, there is a heavy trigger warning for rape, but I don't think I was even prepared for how much rape is in it and how graphic it is. This isn't a book that is unnecessarily graphic, because I think it's necessarily graphic. I think it's important that he included every detail that he included. Every detail mattered. Every detail was important to the overall understanding of the book and the situation. And I loved that it was as graphic as it was, but that made it incredibly difficult to read. I read a lot of books about difficult topics. I've read a number of books about rape, And this one was especially hard. This was probably one of the hardest books about rape that I've read as of yet. I had to put it down pretty much every chapter. I could only read a chapter or two at a time before I had to put it down and just like take a break for the rest of the day to read something else. And I do think that's a warning people should have going in, that it is an incredibly difficult read. But I think if it's something you think you can handle, it's so worth it. It was so wonderful and just a really important book, especially for people who are outsiders like Jon Krakauer was. I would highly recommend picking this up, and honestly any of his books, because the three I've read so far have all been wonderful, and his writing style is really compelling. He makes nonfiction incredibly accessible even to people who don't read it very much, but this book in particular was just wonderful. It's my favorite of his so far, and honestly, this is one of my favorite books of the year. I highly recommend this. I can't say that enough, and I think most people should pick this up. Let me know down below if you've read Missoula and what you thought of it if you have, and also let me know if you've read any of Jon Krakauer's other books, especially the ones that I didn't mention, because I am looking to get into more of his other works. As always, thank you so much for watching, and I will see y'all again soon.